has to be community. That we have to develop a community. If you don't have community, if people don't feel like they're together, then the church splinters and breaks apart. You ever been a part of a church or known a church that's got a lot of people who gossip and tear each other down? It's not a very happy place to be, right? It's actually one of the worst places to be when churches are tearing each other apart. Because it's supposed to be together. We're supposed to be one. It's supposed to be a fellowship. My mother got sick when I was in high school, and she was very sick, and she spent several months in the hospital. And I remember this little church that I went to, they came almost every day with food, and they visited my mother in the hospital because it was a community, because we knew each other, because we lived with each other, because we prayed for each other, because when somebody hurts, then other people hurt as well, because that's what it's supposed to be. So the third element is fellowship, community, building a strong connection, a group of people together. And then the fourth thing is evangelism. That if that community is only focused inward, then eventually it will die. Either through old age, they all die off, or simply because the love inside of them begins to kind of... What C.S. Lewis says that if we don't send our love out, that if we're afraid to actually try to love other people, and we close off our love, we build a wall around it to protect our hearts, that eventually that wall becomes a tomb and our love dies. And in church it works the same way. If the church doesn't reach out to the community, that love, that charity that's supposed to go out to the community eventually festers and dies within the church. Right? So this brings us to the third question. And then what do we do when we go out into the community? And how do we be relevant to a world that is constantly changing? The culture is constantly moving, changing. You walk down on the streets down here in Mongkok or almost anywhere in Hong Kong, and it's not surprising to see people of many different races and nationalities. And even in this room, we have Chinese people, we have a guy from Africa, we have Filipinos people, we have people from North America, we have people from Australia and New Zealand, people from all over the world, right? And this is Hong Kong. This is Hong Kong. How then do we be relevant to a community of so much diversity? How do we reach into that? How do we present the message in a way that will speak to these people in a real and meaningful way? Because it has to be real and it has to be meaningful. If it's flippant, then it's nothing. It has to be real. So how do we do that? Now there are lots of gimmicks, and you can find 12 steps to success books, and you can find 14 leaps to build your church, and 9 hops to hopefulness. I don't know. You can find all these things, right? But you got to. There are principles that we can take. There are lots of different methods, and there are lots of different formulas. You have the postmodern formula for building churches. You have emerging churches, emergent churches. You have seeker-sensitive churches. You have traditional churches. You have charismatic churches. I mean, we have all these different modes and ways. But at the core of all of those, there has to be principles that we use that makes a successful church, that make it successful to reach out into the community and actually reach people. I remember reading an article a few months ago from Relevant Magazine, because it's a Christian magazine in the U.S. for 20, 30-year-olds, Christian magazine. And they were talking about this youth pastor. He's a worship leader in his church, and he went on stage wearing this shirt that he thought had Chinese characters on it, and he's wearing it the whole time. And he plays the song, and they're actually in a cafe, kind of like this. And then afterwards, someone comes up to him who's not a Christian and says, "Man, you are so brave for wearing that shirt on stage." And he's like, "What are you talking about?" And he's like, "It's Chinese. I don't know what it says. Can you read Chinese?" "No, I can't read Chinese, but that's English." "What are you talking about? It's English." He says, "It's English. Go look in the mirror." And he goes to the bathroom and he looks in the mirror, and backwards it says F-U-C, all the way across the mirror. He didn't know it. He bought the shirt. The church, oftentimes we strive so hard to be relevant and to be hip with pop culture that we embarrass ourselves. And we embarrass ourselves. We want to look like the world, we want to dress like the world, we want to play like the world, we want everything to be like it is out there, and we embarrass ourselves. Put ourselves up on the stage for ridicule. Because we cannot be true to ourselves. What does Shakespeare say? To thine own self be true, right? We have to be true to who we are, who God has created us to be. The church has to be. You can't strive to be like the world. When we strive to reach out and be like the world, we lose ourselves. We lose ourselves. Right? But we still have to be relevant. We still have to be relevant. So how do we be the church and be relevant to the community? Well, I thought of a couple of things that came to my mind. The first thing is directly out of the text. And it's the very first thing that happens when the people come out of the upper room and they go down into the streets. What is the very first thing they do? They speak to the people in their own language. They speak in their own language. And you can argue back and forth about speaking in tongues, and glossolalia, and xenoglossy, what it all means, and whether or not it's initial evidence or whatever. But the reality is when they stepped down into the streets, they spoke to the people in their language. They heard it in their language. That is what we need to do. When we reach out into the community, when we reach out to people in Mongkok, in the streets, wherever we are, we have to speak to them in their language. And I mean literally sometimes. I mean, there's some people here in Hong Kong that don't speak English. And we have to speak to them in their language, in Cantonese, and Putonghua, and Tagalog, and whatever language that they speak. We have to speak to them in that language. I'm so shocked. We have these Mormon people who live all around in Tongcheng. Just really filled. You can see them everywhere. You go out sometimes on the weekends and you see them all in their suits and their tags, right? They come here and they know the language before they come, right? And they speak the language to the Cantonese speakers before they ever come to Hong Kong. And I'm so shocked by this. They have so much diligence and passion, and they learn and they work really hard to be able to do that. And too often we don't. No one even bothers to speak the language. Unfortunately, I'm really bad about it. The only language I speak is English, and not very well. But you know, we need to learn. We need to be willing to make sacrifices and make the gospel relevant to people where they are. And it's not just about speaking the actual language, but we have to be able to speak to them where they're at in their life. We need to speak to people where they are. And people struggle in all different ways. And there are all different ways in which people have trials and problems in their life. And we have to be able to reach into those places, into those really messy places, and we have to be able to speak to them where they're at. So the church has got to be willing to talk to people at where they are. They don't have to come to us. We need to go to them. It's not going to happen. How often do non-believers fill the church doors? How often do they come to us looking for the gospel? It's not very often anymore. In fact, I think it's becoming less and less and less as time goes on. One of the things about the pluralism of cultures is that there becomes a pluralism of truth, and all truth becomes relevant, and there's no longer a hierarchy of truth. That this is true and this is not true. The message of the gospel becomes just another voice in the cacophony of voices. It's just another message. Being a Christian is the same as being a Muslim. Aren't they the same God? God and Allah, aren't they the same? That's what they ask. One of the kids in my class, and she's a Form 1 student, she's like 11 years old. She asked me, Mr. Robershaw, do you believe in Jesus? Yeah, of course, I'm a Christian. Do you believe Jesus is the only way to heaven? Yeah, I'm a Christian. That's very mean, Mr. Robershaw. This is the way they see it, and to them it's logical. It makes sense. This is the way they see it. All religions are the same. They're all the same. And we have to be able to speak to them at that level.